Good morning, everyone, and welcome to University Unitarian Church in Seattle, Washington. My name is John Luopa, and I am here this morning with the president of our Board of Trustees, Gayle Childers, and our pianist, Yuli Kopkin, to share this worship experience with you this morning. Because today is the day of our annual meeting, the worship service this morning will be shorter, probably about 20 minutes, and the annual meeting will begin as close to 10 o'clock as possible. That space gives us a little time to get ready for that meeting. All members in good standing should have received an email in the last few weeks inviting you to join in on the annual meeting, and you need only find it and click on the link, and that will get you into the webinar. If you'd like to participate in the annual meeting and are not a member, you may do so by going to the church website and clicking the appropriate link to join as an observer for this important meeting. We think that it'll last no more than 1 hour, and we hope that as many of you as possible can join us for this important conversation. One other event to remind you of is that this evening at 5 o'clock in the church parking lot, we will have our second vigil for Black Lives Matter. This is also, information for this is also available on the church website. If you're able to RSVP in advance, that would be great so that we can plan for the social distancing there. Some members will want to come and remain in their vehicles, and that's perfectly all right. Let us begin the service then this morning with our prelude. We come together to renew our faith in the sacredness, the goodness, and the beauty of life, to reaffirm the way of the open mind and the full heart, and to rekindle the flame of memory and hope. and to reclaim the vision of an earth made fair and all her people one. I invite you to join me now in singing the doxology, words for which are on the screen, and the opening hymn, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door, immediately following.
Good morning, my beloved community. My name is Gayle Childers, and I have the honor of serving as the president of your Board of Trustees. As you can see, I've joined worship service from our chapel. It is good to be here, yet my heart misses seeing you in here. Both John and Beth have noted previously that when they look out, they picture us sitting there in our sometimes predictable seats. And I understand that, because you can't help but need to do that for the comfort it provides. Our sometimes predictable seats. Well, this isn't quite the year we planned for, finding our predictable seats here, and maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. In October, we ended our worship services in a box at Meadowbrook before coming home. But before we leaned into our newly remodeled church, before we figured out where all the rooms were, or set up the audio, or fixed some of our bucket list items, before we could dedicate our church and properly thank the PCIT team for their amazing work, our world was hit with the COVID global pandemic. We, like everyone else, had to pivot quickly to find new ways of connecting and keeping our community together. Welcome to the virtual world. And while we adapted, we witnessed the inequities of how the ravages of the pandemic disproportionately impacted communities of color and the continuing senseless killings of unarmed Black and brown people at the hands of those believing they have the right to kill. The pause in the world has laid this bare for all to see. It has made clear that our commitment to social justice action is just, is necessary, and must continue with all of us taking part. This year at UUC has been one of tremendous challenge and change, where we have shown our resilience and our ability to adapt to change. Our covenant is strong as we check in with each other and find ways to continue our fight. I want to thank all who have contributed to making this year successful in spite of the challenges. To Leanne Warner and the PSIT team who brought us home to our beautifully remodeled home, we will get back here. To Katie Rentschler and Laura Pepping, who ran a shortened yet successful annual pledge campaign in the midst of our virtual world. And to this congregation who responded as we must continue to do so. To the connecting stewards who reached out to our congregation to keep us connected, never before has this been more important. To everyone involved in our many social justice efforts, such as climate justice, Black Lives Matter, UU the Vote, Habitat for Humanity, Teen Feed, and many others. Keep that fight going. To our staff who figured out just about everything, from boxing up the service to coming home to putting us online. To our ministers, John and Beth, who challenge our minds, hearts, and souls every week. To the Leadership Development Committee and other committees that keep us functioning as an organization and as a church. And to our Board of Trustees who care more than you can ever see. It's a privilege and an honor to serve with you. And finally, thank you to this congregation. Each of us helps carry the load to move us ever closer to the world to which we aspire. I came across this poem in this month's UU World magazine by Reverend Sean Parker Dennison from their new book, Breaking and Blessing Meditations. Here's an excerpt. Yes, especially now, when so much is at stake, praise something, anything so alive and extravagant, that it awakens and calls you to discard despair, to abandon apathy, and praise whatever brings you back to life. Let us remain ever engaged, ever joyous, and always a part of this beloved community. Thank you.
Hello, dear friends, members and friends of University Unitarian Church. The American philosopher and psychologist William James once said that all futures are rough. I think we can agree with that, but we might add that all present times are rough and all past times have been rough too. It seems to be very much a part of the human experience on this fragile and beautiful planet. As Gayle has reminded us, we have had tough times, relatively speaking, in the last couple of years, with the Capitol campaign and getting ready to leave the building, being off-site for an additional 6 months beyond our initial projections, and then finally moving back into our new campus just before the holidays, being here only a few months when the global pandemic hit and we were forced to become a virtual community, like so many other communities all across the world. And here we are now trying to figure out a way to go forward, knowing that it is going to be rough. The global pandemic is making its face known to us more and more with every month, and I am afraid that we have not yet seen the full face of its wrath on all of us. To complicate this, to add to this, of course, we mourn the tragic death of George Floyd, an ordinary person, an average American, at the hands of state-sponsored violence, and the tremendous outpouring of anger and outrage all over the world as a result of this. Because he was not an exceptional person, a world leader, he was an average human being with a family, just like all of us, and his murder was so unjust and so unnecessary. And so the world is on fire in response to this. And of course, we have behind the scenes the ongoing crisis in our climate and in our environment, something that doesn't make the front pages or the social media screens with the regularity that it did earlier, but it continues unabated, and its prognosis is not a kind one for us or for anyone. How are we to respond to these things that press upon us for our best intentions, our willingness to sacrifice, our willingness to dream again a world that may be possible for all of us? Many of you have been out on the streets. Many of you have been supporting the protests. Many of you, no doubt, have changed your minds about Black Lives Matter, where only 2 years ago it may have only been merely a slogan, but now is a charge, a mandate to change the way in which we live together in this country and this world. What is our response then as a religious and liberal people, as individuals and as an institution? I think what we are facing before us today, my friends, is an opening and an opportunity. Just as we noted this some 5 years ago, before we went on the enormous effort of renovating this space and paying for it, we have now before us a moral opening to make good on the promise of being brothers and sisters to each other. As religious liberals and progressives, we turn mostly to political solutions to remedy these situations, and we should, and we ought to. But I remind us that we are also a religious and a spiritual people, and we need those resources to sustain us in the struggles that are before us and ahead. And I think what we need is both compassion and solidarity. The compassion is already evident. If you look at the crowds protesting all over the world, there are all races in those crowds. I think that is the first response of a compassion that needs to have us break old patterns of marginalization and oppression of those in our own midst and in our own families. But compassion is not going to be enough. What we need in addition to it is solidarity. And I am afraid that we are far from that yet. But unless we can yoke these two things together, both our natural compassion for each other and for ourselves and for those who've been mistreated for so long in this country, and then do the hard work of understanding we really must live in solidarity with each other, there will be no lasting joy or no lasting peace. The stole that I am wearing this morning comes from Ghana. Our older daughter spent her junior year abroad in South Africa, went back in her senior year to do a research project in Ghana, where she bought this material and brought it back to me, saying, "Dad, I wanted you to have this because I think not only are the colors beautiful with the black robe, but because of the message that the symbolism imparts." And what it says to us is, as they understand it, that God is all. All things are God. That may be language that is difficult for some of us to accept or to understand because we may take a more humanistic or less theistic understanding of things. But the way in which I would translate that is the holy or the sacred, the profoundly beautiful, the intimately good, and the lastingly true is in everything. Can we grow into seeing this in every person we meet? Black lives matter, but they haven't mattered to a lot of people because all lives do not matter to most people, especially people of privilege and people with white skin. If we truly believed that all lives matter, then black lives would matter, brown lives would matter, all lives would matter. The spiritual challenge before us is to change the metaphor with which we live. And we need to move towards that where we find what is holy, what is sacred, what is God-like, what is the Buddha nature, what is the Christ nature in every person we meet, and even in every living thing we meet. This is our work moving forward. And if we can make no progress on this, I believe we have very little integrity as a spiritual community. I've been a minister for 40 years. I'm on the last inning of my professional life, but I see all of the young people around me who are the age of my children and even younger, who are agitated and agitating with tears and screams and pleas for us to join them in seeing the holy in all things. I commit my life to this in the time that I have left before me, and I invite you, every one of you, every age, every generation, whether you're new to us or a long time with us, to join together in this effort to build a beloved community at University Unitarian Church, not for our sakes alone, but for the children's sake and for the world's sake. Let that be not only our prayer, but our charge. Bless you. Amen. I invite you to sing with me our closing hymn, Blue Boat Home. Friends, we remind you that the annual meeting will begin within some minutes after the service ends today, and that you may find the link for that if you are a member in good standing. You should have received an email for that. Remember, too, to check your junk email in case it went there by mistake. And if you would like to join but are not a member and participate in it, please go to the website and find the appropriate link there, and you may look in on the proceedings. Now, therefore, since the struggle deepens truly, and evil abides, and good does not yet flourish, let us gather what strength we have, what courage and what valor, that our small victories may end in triumph, and the world we so desperately yearn for may be a world we can attain. Amen.